"Stop calling me. I'm in a meeting." That's what my husband said, sharp, irritated, while I stood 10 feet away in a marble hotel lobby in Scottsdale, watching him check in with a woman young enough to be our daughter. The afternoon sun poured through the glass walls, turning everything gold, almost beautiful. But nothing about that moment was beautiful. His hand rested on her lower back, easy and familiar, not awkward, not accidental, familiar. That was the detail that settled something deep inside me. Not the lie, not the hotel, the comfort. 27 years of marriage, and I recognized that version of him instantly. The smile, the low chuckle, the way he leaned in when he wanted to impress someone. He used to look at me like that. Now it looked rehearsed. I didn't step forward. I didn't call his name. I didn't need to. I had already heard when I came to hear. The lie wasn't painful anymore. It was clarifying, because while he thought he was hiding in plain sight, I had already signed the papers. I wasn't there to catch him. I was there to end it. I didn't confront him. I didn't raise my voice across the lobby or demand an explanation. Instead, I slipped my phone back into my purse and sat down in one of the low leather chairs facing the elevators. My knees were steady. That surprised me. I had expected shaking hands, maybe tears, maybe the kind of scene you see in movies. But what I felt wasn't hysteria. It was stillness. The kind that comes when something you feared for months finally confirms itself. I watched him hand over our credit card, the same one we used for groceries and birthday gifts, and smile like he didn't have a wife sitting 10 feet away listening to him lie. When the receptionist passed him the room key, he placed his hand on her back again and guided her toward the elevator. They didn't look around. They didn't hesitate. They had no reason to. In his mind, I was home, waiting, trusting. Instead, I was already holding the envelope that would end everything. We didn't fall apart overnight. That would have been easier to explain. What happened to us was slower, quieter. The kind of drift you don't notice until you're already standing on opposite sides of the room. After 27 years of marriage, routines can disguise distance. Saturday mornings at Costco, Sunday church in Mesa, backyard barbecues with neighbors who had watched our kids grow up. From the outside, we looked steady, predictable, solid. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling seen. I remember my 52nd birthday most clearly. He left early for meetings. By late afternoon, there was still no call. At 5:17 p.m., a text came through. "Busy today. We'll celebrate later." No happy birthday. No effort. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at that message, trying to feel angry. Instead, I felt empty. That was the moment I understood something I hadn't been ready to admit. I had become optional in my own marriage. After that, the signs were easier to see. The phone face down, the late nights, the hotel receipt that didn't match the conference location. I didn't explode. I started preparing. And if you've ever felt yourself slowly disappearing inside a relationship, don't ignore that quiet voice telling you something isn't right. Sometimes clarity begins long before the confrontation. If I'm honest, the affair didn't begin the day I saw them in that hotel lobby. It began long before that, with silence, with small dismissals I kept excusing because I didn't want to believe what they meant. After my birthday passed like any other weekday, something in me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. I just stopped expecting. When he came home that night and asked what was for dinner, I didn't remind him what day it was. I didn't ask for a card. I didn't ask for anything. That was the first crack. Not in the marriage, but in me. I realized I had been lowering the bar quietly for years. Then I started noticing details. The way his phone stayed face down on the table, always. The new cologne, sharper, unfamiliar, not something I would have chosen for him. The longer meetings, the extra trips. He was a regional sales manager. Travel wasn't unusual, but the rhythm was off. Subtle, but off. The San Diego conference was the first time my suspicion felt concrete. He packed lighter than usual, didn't take the thick presentation folder he normally guarded like a second briefcase. When he came back, I asked how it went. "Same old," he said. "Nothing exciting." A week later, while organizing receipts, I saw the hotel charge. It didn't match the one listed on the conference website. Different location, different rate. I stared at that receipt for a long time. That was when the thought finally formed without soft edges. Something's wrong. I didn't confront him. I wasn't ready for a lie I couldn't unhear. Instead, I called Carol. She's known me long enough to hear what I don't say out loud. "Linda," she said gently after I explained everything, "you're not crazy. You're just finally looking." That stayed with me. That night, after he fell asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. I logged into our phone account and checked the call history. My hands felt steady, almost detached. I wasn't searching for drama. I was searching for truth. And there it was. One number, repeated over and over. Late nights, early mornings, gaps in between the times he said he was working. I wrote it down. I didn't call it. I didn't need to. The next few days were strangely calm. When you stop fighting reality, things sharpen. I watched him, not obsessively, just honestly. The way he smiled at his screen, the way he stepped outside for certain calls, the way he seemed energized somewhere else and tired at home. One afternoon, standing in the kitchen, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked worn, not aged, worn, like someone who had been shrinking to fit into a version of life that no longer fit her. And that's when the deeper realization came. I didn't want to live like this. Not at 52, not after 27 years of loyalty, not waiting for crumbs of attention from the man I built a life with. Being alone frightened me. I won't pretend it didn't. Starting over at this stage wasn't in my plans, but staying invisible, that frightened me more. So I made an appointment with a lawyer in Mesa. I didn't tell David. I didn't tell Carol. I walked into that office with a folder of documents, bank statements, phone records, hotel charges, and something steadier than anger. Clarity. "I think my husband is having an affair," I told the attorney, "and I don't want to wait for him to decide what happens next." She didn't look shocked. She didn't pity me. She simply outlined my options: community property laws, documentation, process, preparation. That word stayed with me. Preparation. For years, I had been reacting, adjusting, accommodating, smoothing things over. That day, I decided to prepare instead. By the time I stood in that Scottsdale hotel lobby watching him with Emily, yes, Emily, a woman who had once stood in my backyard sipping iced tea and calling me Mrs. Carter, I wasn't there to confirm a suspicion. I was there to finish what I had already begun. The truth didn't shatter me. It steadied me. And that difference changed everything. The moment I recognized her in that lobby, something inside me went very quiet. Emily. Not a stranger. Not some faceless woman from a business trip. I had poured her iced tea in my own backyard 2 summers ago. She had stood near the grill with the rest of David's sales team, smiling politely, calling me Mrs. Carter with that careful respect young employees use around their boss's wife. I remember asking what she did. "I'm on David's team," she had said brightly. Of course she was. Standing there now, watching her lean into him as if that space beside him had always belonged to her, the memory settled over me like cold water. This hadn't been spontaneous. It hadn't started in a random hotel bar. It had grown quietly, right under my roof, while I was setting out paper plates and refilling drinks. For a split second, anger flared, hot and physical. I imagined walking straight across the lobby, saying her name, watching both of them freeze, watching the confidence drain from his face. But that impulse passed quickly. Because I hadn't come there to perform pain, I had come with a purpose. A few hours earlier, I had stood at that same front desk, speaking calmly to the receptionist. She was in her late 40s, neat hair, reading glasses low on her nose, steady, professional. "I don't want a scene," I told her. She nodded slowly. "I understand. I just need him to receive something when he checks out, privately." She looked at the envelope in my hand. Thick, sealed, final. "What is it?" she asked carefully. "Divorce papers." There was a pause. Not judgment, just the weight of reality settling between two women who both understood what that meant. "I can't guarantee," she began. "I'm not asking for a guarantee," I said gently. "Just a moment." She studied my face, maybe looking for hesitation. There wasn't any. Not anymore. Eventually, she gave a small nod. "I'll do what I can." Back in the present, I watched the elevator doors close behind David and Emily. The soft chime echoed in the lobby. Just like that, they were gone. I waited a few minutes before standing. The world around me carried on, guests checking in, quiet instrumental music overhead, the muted roll of suitcases across marble floors. Ordinary. That was the strangest part. My life had just split into before and after, and no one else even blinked. I walked to the front desk and placed the envelope gently on the counter. "Mrs. Carter," the receptionist said, her voice low. "Yes," I replied. "You're sure?" There it was again. Not a question about procedure, but about certainty. I met her eyes steadily. "Yes." She took the envelope and set it beside her computer. "I'll make sure he receives it personally." "Thank you." As I turned to leave, I felt it. Not triumph, not revenge. Control. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for him to decide what happened next. I wasn't hoping for honesty. I wasn't bracing for disappointment. When David checked out later that evening, he wouldn't just be holding a receipt. He'd be holding the end of a marriage he thought I would keep protecting. And this time, I wasn't disappearing quietly. I was choosing.
He got home faster than I expected. The front door opened hard, not the usual quiet click of someone slipping in after work. Footsteps, quick, uneven. Then my name. Linda. I was already sitting at the kitchen table. The late afternoon light stretched across the floor, warm and ordinary. I had been home for 30 minutes. Long enough to take off my shoes. Long enough to place my wedding ring gently on the table. Long enough to let the silence settle into something solid. He walked into the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. For a second, neither of us spoke. His eyes moved from my face, to the ring, to the envelope in his hand. "What is this?" he asked, holding it up like it might transform into something harmless if he stared at it long enough. "What does it look like?" I replied calmly. "Divorce papers?" His voice cracked slightly on the second word. "You had someone hand me divorce papers at a hotel?" "Yes." "That's insane," he said quickly. "Linda, come on, this is crazy." "You're right," I answered evenly. "It is." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once across the kitchen, still trying to gather control, still trying to frame the situation. "You don't have all the information," I interrupted. He stopped. "What?" "I was there. When you checked in." The color shifted in his face, not gone, but thinning. "You're mistaken," he said too fast. "You used our card. Marriott Scottsdale. 2 guests." Silence. For the first time in a long time, he didn't have an explanation ready. "It's not what you think," he tried. "It's exactly what I think." He exhaled sharply. "I didn't want to hurt you." That was the moment the truth landed. Not the affair, but the admission wrapped in soft language. Not denial, not defense, just damage control. "I believe that," I said quietly. "But you did." His gaze drifted back to the ring on the table. "You're really doing this?" he asked. "Yes." Over one mistake. I let that word sit between us. One. He looked away first. "You didn't break my heart," I said, my voice steady. "You just showed me it wasn't there anymore." That changed something in his posture. The confidence drained. In its place, fear. "Where are your things?" he asked, glancing toward the hallway. "Packed." "You planned this." "Yes." And that was the real shock for him. Not the divorce, not the exposure, The fact that I had moved without waiting for his permission to respond. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "We move forward, with lawyers." He stood there in the kitchen we had shared for 27 years, looking like he had just stepped into a life he didn't choose. I picked up my bag. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To stay with Carol for a few days." I paused at the doorway. "You weren't in a meeting," I said softly. A beat of silence. "But I was." And then I walked out.
I didn't sleep much that night at Carol's house. She set fresh sheets on the guest bed, placed a glass of water on the nightstand, and didn't ask for details. Just one quiet question. "You okay?" "I will be," I told her. And I meant it. Around 2 a.m, I stood in her kitchen barefoot, staring out the window into the dark. I expected devastation to crash over me, regret, panic. Instead, what I felt was something steadier. Resolve. By sunrise, I knew I wasn't finished. David had a regional sales meeting in Tempe that morning, the kind with projections, performance charts, polished presentations, structured, controlled. His territory. At 8:30 a.m., I stood in her kitchen bathroom mirror, brushing my hair slowly. Navy slacks, simple blouse, low heels, nothing dramatic. I didn't need attention. I needed clarity. When I arrived at the office building, I sat in the parking lot for a moment, not hesitating, just grounding myself. Inside, I asked for HR. Karen met me in a small conference room, professional, composed. "I believe my husband is engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate," I said evenly, "and that company funds were used." I placed the documentation on the table, hotel receipts, dates overlapping with travel expenses, phone records. She reviewed them quietly, then nodded. "We need to address this immediately." Minutes later, I stood in the doorway of his meeting. David looked up. Confusion, recognition, then fear. "I'm not here to ruin you," I said calmly. "I'm here to stop disappearing." The room was silent. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking to protect his image. I was standing in my own. 8 months later, I moved into a smaller place on the east side of Mesa. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a narrow patio that catches the morning sun just right. It isn't the house where we raised our children. It isn't the kitchen where I spent years cooking dinners that sometimes went untouched. But it's quiet, and it's mine. The divorce was finalized in late spring. Arizona law split everything evenly. Assets, accounts, years reduced to columns and signatures. The process wasn't explosive. It was methodical. Lawyers spoke in neutral tones. Papers were reviewed, revised, signed. David didn't fight much. Maybe he knew there wasn't much left to defend. Or maybe he finally understood that this wasn't a threat. It was a decision. We had one last conversation in a beige conference room near the end. He looked at me and said, "I never thought it would end like this." "Neither did I answered. No yelling, no dramatic exit, just acknowledgement that something had been over long before we named it. The first few weeks alone felt unfamiliar, cooking for one, waking up without the weight of someone shifting beside me, silence that didn't demand explanation. But slowly that silence became peaceful instead of heavy. I picked up part-time hours at a dental office nearby. The clean scent, the steady routine, the simple act of being competent at something outside of marriage, it grounded me. I started yoga at a community center, mornings on the patio with coffee and a book. Some days, without thinking, I still pour 2 cups. Old habits linger. I smile, pour one back into the pot, and sit down. Because I only need one now, and somehow it tastes better. A few months after everything settled, David called once. Not about lawyers or paperwork, just to check in. His voice sounded different, quieter, less certain. He said work had been complicated, that HR review hadn't gone the way he expected. Emily had transferred to another branch. There had been conversations, consequences. I listened, but I didn't step back into the role of comfort. "I never meant for it to go that far," he said. "It already had." That was the thing about choices. They travel further than we think. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind him that I had warned him without words for years. I simply told him I hoped he figured out what he wanted his life to look like. After we hung up, I sat for a moment in the quiet of my living room. No shaking, no second guessing. For a long time, I believed keeping a marriage intact was the same thing as keeping love alive. Now I know better. Sometimes holding something together only hides the cracks longer. Letting go didn't destroy me. It revealed me. If there's one thing this chapter of my life taught me, it's this. Disappearing slowly is still disappearing. For years, I told myself I was being patient, understanding, supportive. I confused endurance with loyalty and silence with strength. But love isn't supposed to make you smaller. It isn't supposed to turn you into background noise in your own home. Walking away at 52 wasn't the plan. It wasn't dramatic or glamorous. It was paperwork, boxes, quiet mornings. It was choosing honesty over comfort, choosing self-respect over familiarity. I didn't win anything flashy. I didn't walk away untouched. I lost a version of my future I had believed in for nearly 3 decades. But I kept something more important. I kept my voice. I kept my dignity. I kept myself. And if you're listening to this while sitting in a life that feels smaller than it should, ask yourself gently, are you staying because you're loved or because you're afraid to leave? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to fight louder. It's to stop disappearing.